All right, I'm back. We're going to start mixing the colors for the oil can. Now, as I'm observing these colors, you remember in the presentation, I talked a little bit about how, you will be surprised to find similar colors in multiple places, even in different objects that are different local colors. So the oil can is like this bronzy, kind of dusty color, if color can be dusty, is a bronze dusty object. And the background and the ground plane, I mean, that's made of a black piece of foam board. However, because the same light is hitting both this and the space around it, and it's reflecting, bouncing off of all of the planes, there's going to be some color sharing involved. So starting with the darker colors in the oil can and working towards the lighter ones, the darker tones to the lighter tones, or darker values to lighter values, I'm going to reference the colors I've already mixed. This one, and this one. Because they might be very similar. They might only change in terms of temperature. I don't know. I'm going to start actually with the same color that I used for the background, and that was burnt umber. Get it on my palette knife. Now, when you're working with a different object that has a different value, like if it were a pear, what you want to do as your starting point is find the pure hue that's closest to what you're observing. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. So right now I'm trying to gauge this burnt umber to the dark part of this oil can. Now there's a lighter side over here and there's a darker side over here. So a lighter side and a slightly darker side. So I'm going to make sure I'm picking just one spot. It looks like I've got the right darkness, but this color, the plain burnt umber, is quite warm. It looks more brown, and by comparison, the oil can, the shadow in the oil can actually looks a little bit greenish. I don't know if y'all can see that. You might be able to zoom in on the video, like pause it and zoom in. So to this umber, I'm going to add some green and see what happens. I don't want to change the value. I just want to change the temperature a little bit. Push it a little bit, kind of cooler towards green. I think I'm going to use my cooler green, my Viridian. Okay. That cooler green, since I used a blue in the previous shadow mixture, that's a cooler color, I'm going to choose the green in this mixture that's a little bit closer to the blue, so it's a little bit cooler. That winter greeny kind of color. So on my palette, I'm making sure, let's see if y'all can see this. Here we go. I've got my background colors here, and I'm mixing my foreground, middle ground colors here. Okay, and I'm comparing it. It's still quite warm. So the color on this palette knife looks like it's more brown. The color on the oil can from where I am, it looks a little greenish grayer. Now, it does not look lighter. It just looks like a little bit cooler. So mixing in that Viridian green, mix it fully and see what happens. The Viridian green, let's see. Yeah, that actually gives me some of the colors that I want in the shadows. It matches up pretty well. The shadows, the deeper shadows that are kind of on the towards the outside of this value shape. The darkest dark within that value shape. I'm going to work on, excuse me. I'm going to see if I can't match this, the green that's kind of, the color that's right in the middle here. It's a little bit lighter and somehow a little bit grayer, which just means it's a little bit more neutral. So I'm going to use that burnt umber like I did before. I'm going to use a little bit of Viridian green. But I know now for the middle area here, that's getting a little bit more light, it needs to get ever so slightly lighter and a teensy bit warmer. Ever so slightly lighter and just a little bit warmer. So I'm making decisions, not just based on what color is it, what color should it be, but I'm actually analyzing each individual component of color, specifically value and temperature. So I'm going to lighten it slightly and warm it up a little bit too by using a teensy bit of yellow ochre. Okay, it's not going to lighten it like white does. I'm just going to lighten it slightly. It's going to make it a smidge warmer than it was. There we go. And that's darn close. Okay, that's darn close. Sorry, there's a little bit of parallax. Just remember, I'm over here. And so when I'm overlapping it, it looks like this, but I know I'll move it over here so y'all can also see. So the edge of my palette knife almost disappears, right? So I know I have the right color in terms of value and the right color in terms of temperature and hue. Now I'm going to work on this color. Now for this color, there's a lot of variation here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for not the lightest light, because remember we approached those last, and not really the darkest dark necessarily. I'm going to try to mix and match this color here, right in the middle. All right. Now when I look at that color independently from down here, okay, I'm not just going to take the color I mixed for this and then add white to it or yellow to it. Okay, that's not how this works. This is an entirely new universe right here. Okay, it exists as a separate moment in space and form than this does. So ignore or forget about how you mixed the color here, and let's look here. Now what color does this, or hue, out of the two, does this most closely look like? Okay, I'm going to go with yellow ochre. It looks very similar to yellow ochre, okay, to me. So this is pure yellow ochre. It's not perfect by any means. It's not a perfect match. But as I overlap it here, kind of tilt it, it's not too far off. It's too intense, it's too yellow for sure. It's a little bit too light as well. Okay, so if it is too light and too yellow, then that means I need to darken it and neutralize it a little bit. Since I've used some burnt umber already, I'm going to use that as like my darkening tool. So notice I've yet to use black at all in any of these mixtures. Okay, black will change the value for sure, but it's also going to change the temperatures. So I like to use it as a last resort. Same with white. I only use it as a last resort if I can't do it any other way. So I'm trying to mix specifically this and match, this area here. Okay, it's still too yellow. It's too intense. It's too closely associating with a hue. I'm going to add a little bit more burnt umber and just see if I can't knock it back a little bit. It's going to darken it a little bit. It may have darkened it too much. That's close. I don't know if I can see. The value is not bad. It's still too yellow. So what should I do? Well, I haven't used black or white yet. Since I haven't used white, I could use black. That would definitely desaturate it. It would darken it up a little bit. Using white would also desaturate it. So it would neutralize it a little bit, right? It would take out some of the yellowy. So using black or white will definitely take out the yellowness, but it's going to change it darker or lighter. I could look to one of the hues, maybe a complementary hue, to try to take out some of the saturation or some of the yellowness that way. Y'all remember from mixing neutrals, I could mix, if this is too yellow, I might mix together some alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue to make a violet. See what that would do. That could be interesting. I'm going to try that just for fun. So I'm going to try to take away the yellow. I'm going to mix into it that little bit of violet. Here's the thing about color mixing. Sometimes you can figure it out and think and rationalize what you need to do to change the color, but at the end of the day, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. Yes, I said crapshoot on a recording that I'm playing for students. So like I'm closer, but it's still not quite right. So that Viridian green was actually a component in some of the other colors. I'm gonna add a little bit of that. Just see what that does. So sometimes you just have to try something. You can kind of analyze why you want to try it. I got greener. So I'm trying to mix this color here. It's not far off. It's a little bit greeny. I'm going to put a little bit more burnt umber. So this is a long process, y'all. All I'm asking y'all to do is just take a good stab at it. I think this is gonna do. Kind of. All right. And I got a little bit dark. As I mixed in some of those other colors, I'm gonna add I haven't used black yet, so I can use a little bit of white. Now, if I had used black earlier in the mixture, I would not want you to use white to lighten it. You'd have to use something else. When black and white are both used in a paint mixture, things just get dead. We call it like a dead color. There we go. That's quite nice, actually. So that's a very close match for that zone. Okay. And so I'm just sitting, blocking in basic values. So I'm actually just going to apply that color all over this top plane. And I'll use those same two colors, those two values, also for up here. All right? For the quote-unquote black box, let me just see if I can mix that real quick. Okay, usually nothing is pure black. Just like hardly anything is pure white. In this case, I held up the black and realized it needed to be like a blue black for that dark bit. And then it looks like the top is the same color as the plane in the background. So I've already mixed that color. So now is the fun part. Okay, so for every area and every object, I've mixed at least like two different values, a dark and a light. The only exception has been this background, which is really just one plane. I don't need two values to describe that. Now, if there was a cast shadow that was falling on this back plane, I would definitely mix two values, okay? But as it is, it's relatively solid. Make sure y'all can see this well. So remember, in your first layer of paint, after you've put down this stain and done your sketch, the first layer of paint, you're gonna work dark to light, background to foreground. You can use a little bit of turpentine, just a little bit, not so much to totally thin the color, because when you apply the paint, you want it to like change something, right? All right, so the great thing about this painting for y'all is that for the most part, y'all are probably using similar or the same compositions, right? I mean, that is an option. And so that means that you've already figured out all of the proportions and the placements of things. Now, isn't this interesting? Like when I start putting this color down, it reads as if it's like brown. I mean, it is on the palette, it's brown. And certainly compared to the gray, the actual grays we mixed earlier, this almost looks wrong. But here is the thing, especially when color enters the equation beyond just value, it always looks wrong. The colors always look wrong, always look wrong, or even ugly, until the entire canvas is covered with paint. So if you, in this first layer, put down some color and you're like, oh my God, that doesn't look anything like it. Unless the value is off, then the color's probably fine. Okay, so I'm just blocking this around. Remember, refining the shapes will come later. I mean, I do want basic proportions to be intact. Look at that. I love working background to foreground because already the object looks like it's coming forward. So I'm going to clean my brush. Since I've mixed all of my colors already, it's just applying the paint. So I'm going to, again, go dark to light, use a tiny bit of turpentine, help this layer dry a little quicker. Tiny bit of turpentine, block in the shadow. Remember to use your brush very efficiently. That means don't like over blend or anything. If you can get something down in one brush stroke, then don't use 50 or 2. Thinning it down, and then I'm just following the map that I have. Got a little bit too much turpentine in that one. So I mean, I know from the first painting that there's a lot of variation within each of these planes. And in the second, especially in the third layers of the painting, I'll get to design those in. Not only in terms of value, like I did in this first one, but also in terms of temperature shifts too. So like the painting part, like the using the brush to apply the paint, is actually not the part of the process that takes up the most time. It's the most enjoyable part of the process to me, for sure. But it's not usually the part that takes the most time. Okay. So I used a little bit of wet into wet between the shadow and the plane. I'm going to use a little bit of wet into wet along this back edge too, just to push it back, even at this stage. All right. Now, I don't know if y'all can tell, but all of these colors on the palette, regardless of like if they're background or middle ground or foreground, they look really similar. Like they're all browns. And so I'm relying almost exclusively on the placement on the palette to remember which is which. Right? Which is which and where it goes. Remember, you're using not a tiny brush. Okay, this is the one that's a little bit smaller than my thumbnail, because it's still the early stage. Okay, so I've got this shadow plane. Make sure I go all the way up to the edge. I'm only putting it where it goes on the object. Going all the way up to the edge. Now I did mix, a part of the middle. That was the middle. Oh, that's funny. Okay, that's okay. This is the color that goes in the middle of this area. I'm gonna put a little bit of this color. It's relatively solid right now, but it defines that structural plane. A little bit later we'll come in and pull out some of this information, right, in the second layer and certainly in the third layer. We're just in the first layer of paint right now. Right, for that top plane, a little bit of terp. Awesome. So the important thing about this part of the process is value and underlying structure. There is quite a bit of glare on that, isn't there? Goodness. So we'll work and build some more lights here on the form, and maybe some lights and temperature shifts here as well. Let's see. Using the same colors. This is more dark. Remember, we're not going for exactitude right now. We're going for good proportion and good structural soundness. So we're not just like, you know, we're not just being sloppy with the paint, but we are being really general. And economic, that might be the best word. Right? So I've got the total block in there. Remember, it's easiest to be darker and then work towards lighter. So I've got my deep blue black. It's on the front plane here. Now look, I've saved, you know, that use of the black for when I really want it to be rich and dark and neutral. And so look how that sets off all of the other colors. Isn't that great? Just keys them in. The Lander bell tower is ringing right now. It must be noon. I don't know if y'all could hear that on the mic. It seems like it should be a special occasion. A lot of fanfare from the bell tower. Okay. And then I'm gonna like just block a little bit in there like this. And this over here is quite dark as well. See, I'm using my brush there, like this. Okay, be conscious of how you're using your brush. The brush can do a lot of work for you. And then there's this warmer, lighter moment here. All right? So that would be the first step of this painting, right? I'll work on the second step painting demo for this. It's going to proceed just like the other one did. The only difference is you're just mixing more complex colors. You're not just looking at values, you're also looking at temperature. Like otherwise, you know, the second stage of this painting, you know, you're finding a little bit of variation within your established values. You're refining the edges a little bit, just like before, and you're using full thickness paint. I accidentally got messed up. Okay, good. If you hit a stumbling block while you're trying to mix colors, just take a stab at it. Like, don't wait to ask me what colors to mix in to make the color do what you want. Just try something. If you're really nervous about it, then take the color you have and split it into two different piles and try out one color mixed with it and then try out a different color mixed in with it and see which one is best. If it's still too confusing, remember, the most important thing is that you match the values of the colors. Even if you can't get the temperature and the hue or the intensity, you got to match the values. That means that you have to paint the oil can blue because you can't get it to not be blue. That's fine. Just make sure you've got the right dark blue and the right light blue. Okay. I can't wait to see what y'all do with this. I'll see you later.